Maybe you've been using AI for a while now to write emails, papers, maybe even brainstorm ideas, and suddenly you realize you can't do it on your own anymore. Has AI taken a piece of your thinking? And if so, what could this mean for you and for society? Research has shown that use of navigation software such as Google Maps actually hurts our navigation ability. This phenomenon where we get more and more reliant on a machine for mental tasks is called cognitive offloading, and there is mounting evidence that the same thing is happening when we use AI. In this video, I showed that AI makes us dependent on it to generate creative ideas. Other research shows that AI negatively affects critical thinking. A study done on solving puzzles shows that people using a helper to solve a puzzle did worse when they had to do it without one. They were less efficient than those who just used their own brains. They had become dependent on a machine. Cognitive offloading seems to be everywhere, and like a dark, growing vortex is sucking in more and more of our minds. But what mental skills are being taken over, and does it even matter? Maybe everything will just be okay in the end, right? It will be like the calculator back in the 70s and 80s. People were scared back then that people would forget how to think without it, and yet here we are, still doing math. Sure, we don't need to calculate numbers manually all the time. So what mental skills should not be offloaded? Where do we draw the line? That is the question. In order to answer this question, let's come up with a quick hierarchy of mental skills. Let's think of our skills in a general way from simple to complex. First is rote memorization, being able to remember a simple fact or thing, such as a number or a word. Then there are skills that relate to or more things, for example, adding numbers. Let's go up the complexity ladder. From a skill like adding a bigger number to something more general, not just something that increases a given variable, but something that relates many variables. How about stringing together a coherent argument? This means making basic sense of your thoughts. This means logic. If we offloaded that, we could expect that our ability to relate ideas together would start to be offloaded to a machine owned by a private company. Our perception of truth would already be endangered. But we are not done yet. We have to go one step further up the complexity ladder: critical thinking. From thinking about single things to relating many things, critical thinking is above even that. It is thinking about thinking. It's meta-thinking. It's questioning what we see and hear, and your and others' arguments, and examining them, not just buying them wholesale. Going back to our model, we could put critical thinking at the very top because it contains all the rest. Critical thinking is like the moat around the castle of our minds. So, what if this is being taken away? If thinking about thinking is taken away, then our ability to determine what is happening around us would be damaged. There is a frightening conclusion from this. We might not be able to tell if our other abilities have been offloaded. This would be like a domino effect. Like the city walls around our minds are being breached, allowing any Trojan horse to barge in with unquestioned ideas and further cognitive offloading. Critical thinking seems to be that red line, that defense which, once gone, would accelerate the loss of our abilities and our humanity. But what happens if society as a whole loses this skill? First, we have to ask the question, why does it matter if we lose our critical thinking? Hasn't humanity survived long enough without such a focus on critical thinking? Now, this does have a point. Perhaps the Sentinel Islanders or other tribal peoples throughout history didn't need critical thinking as we understand it today. They needed a much different set of mental skills that helped them survive. But you watching this probably don't live in a tribe. Well, ask yourself, what kinds of societies did they live in? What systems of governance and economics did they have? What systems do we have? You have to start taking back the critical thinking that the system is taking away and start using it to think about the bigger issues. Let's take a quick look at our economic system as it is. In our system, especially in America, the goal is profit above almost all else. To do this, people who produce products need to lower costs, and to do this, they hire as few workers as possible. This means automating away as many of our abilities as possible. Why would they ever stop? It just wouldn't make sense to them, because this is how the system works. It's not because they are all mustache-twirling villains, although some are, but because if they don't, then other technocrats will, and they will lose competition and thus profit. So how does critical thinking play into this? If critical thinking is lost, the domino effect will happen, and most of us will no longer be able to tell that they are losing fundamental human abilities to unknown actors from private companies that don't have your best interest in mind, but profit. If continued indefinitely, it would be idiocracy for real, actually a movie about a society controlled by AI created by the few smart people left before they died. So you see, a lack of critical thinking wouldn't matter in, say, a medieval society because it wasn't the goal of the landlord to replace you. Tribal people weren't worried about being automated. Those systems, albeit far from ideal, were relatively stable and predictable. But critical thinking does matter in ours because it protects us from being dehumanized and exploited. Now that we know, what's the solution? Either change the system or hold the line. Changing the system is a topic for another day and is daunting. Holding the line, the red line of our critical thinking, is the best we can do now. The best we can do now is follow one golden rule when using AI. Have it do the least thinking possible. Let's look at some scenarios. If you are looking up information, use AI in a way that does as little thinking as possible. That means treating it like a search engine to look up just pure information and not arguments. Using our hierarchy of skills in the beginning, this would be like always aiming for as low as possible on the hierarchy, basically just pure information, and not the higher skills that involve relating more things together. So for example, what if you want to write a story? Instead of asking it to just write the story, you could ask it, how do I write the story? Or even better, tell me a book that teaches me how to write a story. See how the work performed by the AI decreases each time as yours increases. See how more and more thinking is being delegated back to you and the other humans? This is how we hold the line and stop cognitive offloading. Using it as a slightly flawed but advanced search engine to locate possible sources of information written by humans is always a good bet. Besides following the golden rule, you can also tell a friend or family member that AI really does hurt our brains. It really does take away our ability to think, to question, some of our most cherished human traits. Although there are many issues and problems that imperil us as a species, I think long-term, this is one of the big ones. So I hope we can take action sooner rather than later. Thanks for listening and stay human.